and this also includes all beings whatsoever. All people are manifestations, disguises of the total reality behind this cosmos. And that if that is so, there are not any mistakes in the world.
You've been on my mind for a while now. Feel like we've been lying for a while now. Your body shine like gold and I can't help when I touch you. Waiting on my soul weighs you down. We should let it go.
Good evening.
Around too long.
Welcome to the Dominance Academy. I am your professor for the evening, Mr. Justin. Welcome. We had a good lecture for you this evening, and it's around the differentiation between the man she obeys and the man she tests. And it's not any sort of like distinct man, really. He doesn't have a look. He doesn't have a particular type of job. He doesn't have a certain circle of friends. He may be well known or he may be a hermit. So it's not what any particular kind of man, but it is. Shout out to Uncle Guns. Thank you for posting my links. Anything you need is right there. Access to the website, books, tutorials, the whole suite. What's up, man? I see you. Yes, sir. Yep, take a seat. Get comfortable. Pull in. Yeah, so tonight we're going to be talking about these types of, archetypes. These kind of archetypes, as we're going to be getting into tonight. I do have a small announcement. I'm working on a new book. It's still in the works. I'm maybe like halfway through because I wrote it, and then I'm like, nah, this needs more. So I'm going back again, and it's a book about the intersectionality between BDSM and Taoism, and because I have personally found that the way of life that I have lived before I was an adult, or into my young adulthood, and I've told the stories of me, living in a Shaolin temple, that I started studying Eastern philosophy when I was about 12 years old, and now I'm in this lifestyle, and I'm not even consciously thinking about it, but just my conditioned mind from all of that into, pretty much everything I do, including this, not consciously, of course. And I'm noticing a lot of similarities, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is like very much the same, but just different pathways. And so I'm writing a book showing the intersection between these two things. It's not exactly anything to learn from, like there's no techniques or drills or exercises or anything like that. It's just more of a talk like the ones that we do here, but much more focused and with a point, to show that things are not always what they seem. I think that if you get into this lifestyle and you continue on it long enough, you'll soon discover that. So that's what I'm working on. But let's get into this lecture tonight. The man she obeys and the man that she tests. So let me start with something that is going to bother half of you, and the other half, you're going to nod your head so much that your neck hurts. And every woman that you've ever been with, every single one, has tested you. And whether you knew it or not, and whether she knew it or not, and that's not being cynical, it's just plain basic biology. So here's the thing that most people don't really talk about. And there's a woman who tests a man endlessly, chronically, almost compulsively. And then there's a woman who, with the same man or a different man, goes quiet. She settles, she follows his lead, not because she's been beaten into submission, not because she's been manipulated, and not because she's afraid, but because something in her has recognized something in him. And that recognition does what no amount of negotiation, arguing, posturing, or pleading ever could. And she just stops. So today, I want to pull that apart, okay? Because there are men out there who are running themselves ragged, trying to stop the tests, trying to pass them one by one like some kind of hellish video game. And they don't realize the whole game changes when you become a different kind of man. And this is a sort of thing that a lot of guys don't really understand. I think especially the red pill guys, and especially the well, any of those sort of dudes like MGTOW and so on, but is also the PUA guys. And it comes from looking at things, looking at women and the interactions that we have through a particular set of lenses. But these lenses are fixed. And that's the problem. I'm giving you fair warning that it's fine to pick up lenses, right? Try them on, see how the world looks through them. Totally fine. Okay. But do not allow them to become affixed to your face. This is incredibly dangerous. Even my views. So, even like views of your own, right? So, nothing should become a permanent fixture on your face in which to see the world, because if you have a lens, you're not actually seeing the world or the people as they are. You're casting colors on them, much like if you've ever been in a photo studio and they've got the lights on and there's these things called gels. I don't know why they call them gels, but they're just these thin pieces of colored plastic, and you slip them in over the front of the light and it changes it to a red light. It changes to a yellow light or a green light or whatever. And this is the same thing. So you're still looking at reality, but it's tinted. It's tinted by one of these gels. And you don't want to get stuck there. And the thing is that a lot of times, much like beliefs, they engage your emotions. And once your emotions get engaged with something that you're perceiving, it'll turn into a belief. And then once it turns into a belief, you're not stuck, but you're now in one hell of a jam, because it's very difficult to take apart beliefs because of the emotional tie, which has tethers deep inside you. This is why they say when you're in a bar, don't talk about politics or religion. And the reason being is because there's beliefs involved, and beliefs, especially strong ones, have a strong connection to your emotions. And that's when people get riled. They start throwing punches. They start getting angry and argumentative. So that's why they say that. And so, but that's not the problem. Isn't like avoidance. The problem has to do with attachment to what you are seeing, what you think you're seeing. And so always be reminded of that scene in The Matrix, like the first one, when Neo and Morpheus were fighting in like the Kung Fu studio, and they're jumping around and trying out all these different styles and stuff. And Neo's breathing heavily on the ground, and he's like, I can't be you. And Morpheus kind of walks over to him. He's great. He's standing up straight with his hands behind his back, and he bends over perfectly at the hip. And he goes, do you think that's air you're breathing right now? And that's the sort of thinking that you need to bring to yourself every once in a while to challenge your beliefs. Like, am I really seeing things as they are right now? Or am I casting a belief? Am I putting a gel over the situation for whatever reason? And understand that when you keep it there for long enough, your emotions will get engaged and it will become a belief. And then it'll be really hard to get rid of that belief. I'm working with a guy right now. I've been with him for a few months now, a short few months. And he has been so indoctrinated by red pill views that it's nearly impossible for him to see women any other way. He sees them as these almost vile, selfish creatures who will stop at nothing to get their own gratification, and that they don't have a single nice bone in their bodies, that they are highly strategic, and they will do whatever it takes to get what they want. And so he basically sees women as like they're all manipulative hoes. That's his view. Manipulative hoes. And it's stunting him, right? Because what this does is it takes his own fear of rejection and it amplifies it. All right. It gives him good reason to stay still, to do nothing. Right. So his underlying fear is the real thing, right? And then he has this lens which projects a certain image of women, a certain belief about women, and what could possibly happen. And it takes that fear and just digs it in. It digs it in just a few feet deeper. And it's really, really tough on him because he's adhered to a particular belief. So he's going to be with me for a while, trying to untangle this stuff. But he's getting there. So, have faith. So we're going back to, this, pulling this thing apart, about guys running themselves ragged, trying to beat the tests, learning how to beat the shit tests. And then there's also guys confusing compliance with peace, thinking that women who don't push back are women who are happy. And these are not the same thing, not even remotely. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk about what testing actually is. Okay, because the word gets thrown around like it's obvious, but it's not. A shit test, and I'll use that term because it's honest, it's not a woman being irrational. It's not her being difficult. It's not her nervous system. I'm sorry, it's not her being disrespectful. It's her nervous system doing something extraordinarily sophisticated. It is her, consciously or unconsciously, probing the structural integrity of what's in front of her because she doesn't know. She just met you, right? How you could be the greatest guy on the planet, like you're fucking Captain America, but she doesn't know who Captain America is. You're just like, John Smith, and she knows nothing about you. And also, what she does know is that there's plenty of guys who can cosplay as Captain America very well. And she doesn't want to get burned. Okay. Who does? So think about an engineer who needs to cross a bridge. Before she puts her full weight on it, she bounces on the edge, shakes a railing. She looks for flex. She looks for give, for the groan of something that won't hold. She's not being dramatic. She's being intelligent. Women evolved to test men because for the vast majority of human history, choosing the wrong man was catastrophic. We're not talking about choosing a mediocre Netflix subscription. We're talking about, will this person protect me when the predator comes or when the warring tribe comes? Will he provide during famine? Will he stay when things get hard? Can he take 1/3 of our children dying during the winter? The stakes were existential. So her nervous system developed a brilliant, annoying, completely functional screening mechanism. She tests certainty. She tests consistency. She tests what you do when the world pushes back on you. And I say this often to my students as well, that women are sort of like this microcosm of the world. All right. And so by her giving you this bit of resistance of just not like compliance like that, which would be utterly stupid. Like, think about it. If you had a daughter, would you want her to be compliant like that upon meeting a guy right away? You like, it's just stupid. It doesn't make sense. And you can see this rationally, but when you're in front of it, you get so fucking butthurt. After it happens, you kick yourself like, man, I should have done the A47B move. And it's like, that I learned from my PUA group. That's not it at all, right? It's not it at all. She's performing a very, very natural function. Okay. And yeah, some guys will pass and many guys will fail. And that's good, right? That actually, if we look at it, or old biology, that actually helped our species to be strong. Like, think about it. If like a woman who got impregnated by just whoever, basically would come down to whoever got to her first, right? So the quickest, scrambliest, sneakiest guy would be the one who impregnates her. And he may or may not have the best genetics. The babies get born with fucking 3 arms and shit. All right. They get born with maladaptive genetics. And it's like, well, whatever, You know what I mean? Who gives a fuck? Because, he just got there first, right? But that's not what promotes healthy nature. It doesn't help promote strong gene pools. And I see this in groups where they kind of keep the gene pool small, and it's really bad, right? Like people like having kids with like second cousins and shit. Like that's not far enough apart. That's why your kid at the age of 3 has fucking Coke bottle glasses, where they get sick by just going outside. Like it's not good, right? So we want strong genetics, and that screening that women have just baked into their nervous system is the thing that helps us all. Okay, it helps us remain as a strong species, and that's just the way it is. And also the truth of it is that not every man will procreate because we all don't have great genetics. That's just the fucking luck of life. You know what I'm saying? Some fish have big fins, some fish have small fins, and it's the same species of fish. Oh, well, you know what I'm saying? Like she goes for the fucking fish that has the big fins because it says, this is healthy, this is strong. My body is programmed to want those genetics. So I'm going to give that fish my eggs. It's just what it is. Okay. Get over it if you're upset by that. Okay. So, but that's like ruined by like all these like stupid social things. Like, oh, there's somebody for everybody. No, there isn't. There isn't. I'm sorry. Like if you look like fucking Quasimodo and you live in a cave, like no, like you're cooked, as the kids would say. Sorry. All right, so biologically, we can look at what's happening here. Okay, research on cortisol and testosterone shows that men who maintain composure under stress, who don't spike into anxiety, who don't collapse into placation, are read by female nervous systems as fundamentally different. Why? Because she's not like that. Like inside, she might be cool and like composed on the outside, but inside she has the anxiety. There's the spiking of anxiety. She has the internally the inability to maintain composure under stress. Okay, it's just the way she is. She's like more finely wired, and it's for a good reason, because that the plus side of that is she can sense things and read scenarios, read people really well, really quickly, at least on an instinctual level. Okay, so man, something in my tooth. Anyway, so it's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, right? It prevents her from actually relaxing, which is where a grounded man comes in, okay? Because he allows to cast that spell over everything by his composure, by her getting the sense of him that he's unfettered by anything, that he's nonplussed by everything around him. Doesn't bother him. What do the kids say? Nonchalant, that he's just okay with everything, right? In terms of like his nervous system, right? He doesn't have to agree with everything, but it just doesn't bother him. He's not moved off of his square. And so, so she reads this as different, and not just psychologically, but physiologically, okay? The autonomic nervous system detects calm, it detects groundedness, and it responds to it. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss, really well known, he's got a couple of great books you should check out, has spent decades documenting this. Women across virtually every culture prioritize what he calls resource acquisition potential. But dig deeper and you find that what women are actually detecting beneath the status markers is psychological robustness. Can this person hold themselves together? Like in any situation, big or small. Can this person hold me together when I can't? And that's what I mean, that women are like this microcosm. Like if you can't handle a little girl kind of like losing it, right? Or breaking down or whatever, then that sends a message to her that like, okay, maybe this guy also can't handle the world. And therefore I'm not going to feel safe with him in the world. And now this is where it gets interesting, right? For our purposes. Testing is not just pre-relationship phenomenon. It persists. It intensifies often during periods of stress, transition, or when a woman is feeling insecure about the connection. And here's what most people get completely wrong about this: the tests don't stop because you pass them. And this is like, the weird like grade school mentality that a lot of guys bring to relationships. They're like, oh, if I like do the thing, then I'm done. Right. And like a lot of guys will treat girls this way, like, oh, okay, I got her. So now I'm just gonna like kick my feet up. Right. All the work has been done. And that's just incorrect. So, and they stop because you stop being someone who needs to prove anything. So that's the difference. Okay. The tests, they will stop because you stop being someone who needs to prove anything. And that's the distinction. That's the entire thing. And everything else I say today is just dressing around that single bone. The man she tests is the man who is whose solidity is, he's, so like, she's still evaluating. Okay. So if she's testing him, basically that means that she is just continuously evaluating what's going on with him, because there's like a lack of consistency, or a lack of groundedness, and she gets a sense of uncertainty from him. Okay. The man she obeys, and I mean obeys in the richest, most voluntary sense of the word, is the man whose solidity she has already recognized. And the recognition isn't intellectual. It isn't a decision that she makes on a whiteboard. It's felt in her. It's registered in the body before the mind even has a chance to weigh in. So let me make an important distinction, because when I use the word obey, some of you are going to get uncomfortable, and some of you are going to get excited for entirely the wrong reason. There are two kinds of female compliance, and they should not be, and they could not be any different. The first is compliance born of fear, manipulation, coercion, a woman walking on eggshells, a woman who doesn't argue because she's been punished for arguing, a woman who follows because the alternative has been made too painful, either physically or emotionally. This is not what we're talking about. This is not power dynamics. This is abuse. It produces a specific kind of dead-eyed quiet that is in the opposite realm of intimacy. You get a body in the room in an absence of where a person used to be. Then there's a subtler version of this first category that most people miss entirely. And this is one that's tricky because it can look on the surface like the real thing. And this is the woman who performs compliance because it benefits her. She's figured it out, consciously or unconsciously, that playing the role of the devoted, yielding woman gets her security, status, attention, a lifestyle, and so on. She performs submission the way someone performs any role that pays well. She's not afraid. She's not broken. She's transacting, and she's very good at it. And you might be one of these people at work, or you know somebody who's like this at work, and they are really good at putting on that face, like as if they live and breathe to belong at that job. And you're like, holy shit, like, I know what you're like after hours. You are not like this. This is totally fake, but it's done so well, it's believable. And I used to get jealous of those kind of people because I can't do that. I can't put on like this fake face. That's why partially why I was fired from being a waiter many, many years ago after I graduated college. I started working at this place. It was a California Tex-Mex joint. And it used to be a walk-in spot. There was maybe like 3 or 4 stools by the front window, but it was mostly an in and out kind of spot. And the boss was brilliant. She was this really attractive woman in her 30s. And her name was Joanna. And she hired only good-looking skater boys with tattoos. That's it. A brilliant idea. And basically, just the store was just constantly flooded with girls coming to order food, but so that they can catch glimpses of boys and talk to them and all that stuff. And eventually, she grew and took over the space next door and turned it into like a white tabletop version of the restaurant. So it was like Tex-Mex, but she also added like finer items to the menu. And so they, had tall tables, white tablecloths. There was a big copper top bar, and so on. And she's like, "All right, Justin, you're going to move on, and you're going to become a waiter." I'm like, "Okay, cool. How hard could it be?" and I really could not put on that fake face. I really couldn't. And and she was watching me and stuff like that. And she's like, "Justin, you kind of gotta like, you know, put on the cheer, you know what I mean? Like be positive and act like you like them." Like, I'll try. I wasn't exactly mean, but I just couldn't do it. Until one day. And I shouldn't have done this, but I did. And it was lunch shift, and this enormous woman comes in, and she sits down, and she was the only woman in. Like, it was like the first service for the lunch, and she sits down, and yeah, she was just huge, dude. And she orders the California burrito, and this is the largest burrito that we had on the menu. Like, it had everything possible in this thing. I mean, it was the size of like a fat baby's thigh. Okay, massive burrito. And it already comes with extra guacamole and extra sour cream inside it. Okay. And I take her order, she has a drink or whatever. And she's like, "Oh, I'd like to add like a side of extra sour cream and a side of extra guacamole." And I'm walking away. There's music playing, mind you. Okay. Like loud enough, like to kind of fill the space, but not blaring, but also not quiet. And I'm probably about 20 feet away, walking away. So my face was in the other direction. She's behind me, 20 feet away. And I said something under my breath, something about like, "You're the last person who needs extra anything," right? Something along those lines. And it was not loud at all. I swear I said it under my breath. And she has those like magic fat people ears, because they're like very sensitive to like what people think and what people say. So they probably developed like insane hearing. And she fucking heard me. and and like the next day, Joanna, she calls me and she's like, "Justin, you can't be saying stuff like that." She's like, I know, like I get it. I understand, but you cannot say these things. Like, say it in the dish room, say it in the basement. Don't say it on the floor. Uh, Even if you think you're quiet enough. And she's like, "Well, I can't fire you because you've been with me for so many years. So I'm going to make you a baker." And that was one of the best things because I, started my day at like 5 in the morning, and then by lunch shift I was done, and I had, and then I learned how to bake. So if you're looking for like a bomb ass creme brulee or raspberry torte recipe, hit me up. So I completely lost track of why I told that story, but that's a funny story from my youth as a young man. But let's get back on track here. So, transacting, okay, performing, being good at it. All right, yes, the waiter. All right, so I'm not good at that shit. A very long story to say that I'm not good at performing fake niceties. Anyways, so you'll not necessarily feel the difference in short term, okay, but over time, with this performance, you'll start picking up on the hollowness of it, and it's a strategic quality. And the compliance, it has edges. It's available when she wants something and withdraws when she doesn't. And the withdrawal can be great or it can be just a very subtle withdrawal. And I've noticed this too. I've been in situations where I experienced this, and it was in a dynamic. And it was almost like I got her submission when she was in a good mood or when things were suiting her, but not when things were bad. And when things were bad, she would regress. She would kind of pull back into her regular self. And I'm like, you heard the phrase "fair weather friends." I was like, I've got a fair weather submissive, which isn't being submissive at all. Like, you're doing submission when it's convenient, right? But that's not a submissive. A submissive is submissive when it's inconvenient and when it's convenient. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It's like a lion is a lion, whether it's raining, snowing, or sunny. Like it is what it is. So I've experienced this. Okay. And so it comes with a ledger, and that ledger is a tell, because real surrender has no ledger. It doesn't keep score because it's not calculating. The second kind, the kind worth understanding, is what happens when a woman encounters a man whose nature is so coherent, so genuinely settled, that her own nervous system relaxes into it. And not because she was forced to or coerced, not because she made a rational decision to submit, but because something animal in her recognized something animal in him. And everything in her said, yes, here, this guy, this is the feeling that I want. This is what I've been seeking. And here's what I want you to understand about this experience from her side, because this is the part that almost nobody talks about. When it's real, something in her concept of self begins to thin, not disappear, but thin. The ego, that constant internal narrator that's always tracking, always evaluating, always asking, am I safe? Am I seen? Am I enough? It starts to get quiet. The boundary between where she ends and the dynamic begins becomes permeable in a way that she can't fully explain and doesn't need to because she's so comfortable. She stops managing herself in his presence. That effortful self-consciousness that women almost carry constantly, the performance of being a person, it softens. And that in that softening, there's an enormous relief. This is not disillusion. This is not losing herself. This is what it feels like to put down a weight she forgot she was carrying. In BDSM and power exchange communities, which have actually been studying this dynamic with far more rigor than mainstream psychology has, they call this the genuine. They call this version of this genuine consensual surrender. And what's fascinating about this is that the most powerful submissives, the ones who go the deepest, are almost always the most self-possessed, self-aware, high-functioning individuals outside the dynamic. The ego doesn't disappear. It chooses to step aside. That choice is only available when there is something genuinely trustworthy to step aside for. Now, and this is important, he does not earn this. I want to be precise here because the language of earning, and the reason why I bring this up because it's talked about constantly. Oh, you have to earn her submission. No, you don't. It's not earning because that sets up a power dynamic that is in reverse. Okay. You're not trying to get something from her. Okay. You're not trying to perform, right? You're not trying to pay in, right? Because that's how you earn things. You either like perform well or you pay into something, the sweat equity, like whatever, you know what I'm saying? So the language of earning places her in a position of authority she's actually trying to step out of. So get that out of your head. So he's not auditioning. He's not performing for her approval and waiting to see if he passes. What he does is different. He cultivates a quality of presence, of groundedness, a clarity and consistency of self. And that quality creates an environment, not offered as a proposition, not extended as if to say, is this good enough for you? It is simply what he is. And she feels it the way that you feel warmth from a fireplace when you walk into a room. You didn't negotiate with the fire, you just came closer. There's a kind of gravity to it. It's gentle, it's not demanding, it's not desperate, but it's very real. And she moves toward it, not because she was pushed, but because something in her recognized what it was and wanted to be near it. That's the distinction between cultivation and performance. One pulls, the other pleads. Now, don't confuse pulling either, okay? It pulls in the same way that like the Earth's gravity pulls the moon, okay? Like it pulls it as just a result of what it is, okay? Not out of the conscious effort to pull, right? It just does it naturally. Now, I want to talk about the thing that actually separates these two men. Sorry. Oh, yeah. Yes, you were making noise. Yeah, the big boy. Now I want to talk about the thing that actually separates these two men. Because if you're sitting here thinking the answer is technique, the right response to the right test, the perfect frame control script, I'm going to disappoint you. And it's funny because, in it's kind of ironic because in learning how to understand and move and create framings, right, which is basically how you see reality, uh, you have to learn scripts, right? Uh, like in order to act, you have to learn a script, and then after a while, it's not even really necessary, right? You can just become, and and so it's just ironic that to to get to where I'm talking about, you don't rely on scripts, but in order to understand certain things, you need scripts, right? You need to see the language first, and then after a while, you can just start speaking it fluently. So, and I say that because there's like a couple of my guys, perhaps watching right now, who we're doing this right now, where they're learning framing scripts, and but it's really they're just training wheels, right? Until you get the feel of it, and you're like, oh, okay, I can start kind of creating and weaving and shifting things on my own and casting these. I visualize it as like a colored glass dome over something, right? So like the girl says something and then you turn it into a joke or you flip it or change its meaning and then or you just completely redirect and that's you placing this colored dome and you're like, no, 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 I want it to be orange. You're talking about this green color over here. No, 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 it's becoming orange now. And it's something like very overt like that, or it's a subtle shift. And you subtly shift it to the color of your, glass dome that you've been planning on casting over everything. So there's an art to it, okay? But but it's not about amassing these skills, okay? There's really no script. There, like once you kind of get through these things, there's no script. Just in the same way, like when Bruce Lee kept studying and studying and studying and practicing and training and fighting and all this stuff, he came to a position where he's like, the best style of fighting is the style of no style, where you're not fixed. You know, the ancient Chinese kung fu masters and stuff like they had this idea as well. They had the five basic animal forms. What was it? Tiger, crane, snake. I think it was monkey and leopard. And so these were the five basic first animal forms. And guys would just master like one particular style. And they're like, okay, I've mastered the crane style, right? But then there's a sixth style, which is the dragon style, where you train from all of the different animals and you can shapeshift between all of them depending on the scenario. And this is the ultimate place because you're this stylist, this a style without style. And that to me is like the ultimate form. Again, kind of going back to the lenses that I was talking about, not having something fixed on your head. Like, no, 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 I am the tiger style. That's all I do. This is all, it's like taking a hammer to every fucking construction problem. It's like, you're sure if you tried hard enough, you can put a screw in with a hammer, but that's really not the best way. You need a screw gun. So it's like that, right? Like not getting fixed with these lenses or with this style or with this mindset and having the style of the dragon where you can shapeshift and morph and become whatever you want or whatever is necessary. And it's a very powerful place to be in. And this will pay dividends in the bedroom because to have that kind of flexibility, you're basically becoming like an energetic being where you can shift and take the form of whatever it is that you want. But also because, in dynamics and in the bedroom, you're not always in complete control of everything, no matter how good you are. All right. There's just things that come up and that are unexpected, right? Where maybe something gets really intense and she starts sobbing. You got to shift to that really quick. You got to shift into like, oh shit, there's this like weather change while you're out on the boat, and you're like, whoa, fuck, okay, like bring down the sails, like everybody get down below, like it's batten down the hatches because that just a sudden shift that you were not expecting. So you have to be flexible to these things, but all sorts of stuff can come up. I was just choosing something drastic there so you understand. So know that there's no script, okay? There's a concept that I keep coming back to, right? You let water run long enough over any surface, and it doesn't force anything. It doesn't try to get around the rock. It just goes. Okay. It just ends up going around the rock. It takes the shape of whatever contains it or whatever it's in its way. And in the long run, it reshapes everything. Water doesn't test the rock. Water doesn't argue with the rock. Water just is. And eventually, the rock changes. Eventually, it'll wear a hole right through that rock or completely change its shape. So the man she tests is the man whose identity is dependent on the test. He needs her to acknowledge that he's enough. So, and that's just a massive, massive problem. We could probably spend an entire show talking about that alone. He needs her to not push so he can feel stable. And like one of my guys is like that. The minute he feels resistance, he's like, I'm done. It's like, dude, all she did was just put a little itty bitty test in there, right? You know, this guy, he didn't like the tone of her voice. You know, he thought that she was too masculine. And it's like, and then you just wanted to give up, run away, tuck your tail between your legs, you know? Like, why? It's just a girl, you know? Oh, okay. So she was kind of flat, like tonally. Guaranteed she's not always flat. Guaranteed she has a beautiful laugh. She's probably cute and weird and quirky and, you know, all sorts of things that girls are. She just happened to be flat in that moment. And because it wasn't suiting your sensitive emotional needs for safety, like safe enough for you to proceed, right? Like you kind of wanted to make it, you wanted her to make it easy for you. And since it wasn't, then you kind of like turned tail and walked away. And it's like, come on. Like, you couldn't handle a tonal shift? Like, what are you going to do when she's actually upset, right? How are you going to handle that tension? So he needs her to acknowledge him, right? He needs her to make it easy. He needs to, so that she doesn't push back, so that he can feel safe and he can feel stable. His groundedness is conditioned on her behavior, her mood, her approval, and she feels that. Women can feel that in the way you feel turbulence in the air before a storm. Like, you ever notice that? Like, you're kind of out and you didn't, maybe you saw the weather report, maybe you didn't, but you can kind of feel it in the air when like a thunderstorm is going to happen. And it's true, there's these subtle like barometric pressure changes, the ions in the atmosphere change, and we can just pick up on that. Like instinctually, there's something in our nervous system that can feel those changes. You know, and animals do it too. They start acting funny. So that's how she can feel it, right? There's nothing like overt, like happening right then and there, but it's these subtle shifts, and it tells her system like, hey, something's not right here, and which prevents her from relaxing. So she can't see it, but she absolutely can feel it. Psychologically, what's happening here maps into attachment theory. Now, I'm not big on attachment theory, but it does have like some merit to it. Okay. It's just not as bulletproof as pop culture psychology would like it to be. Okay. So I take it with a grain of salt. So there's like different categories, and one of them is the anxious attachment. So the anxiously attached man is constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of the relationship. He's constantly monitoring the emotional temperature of her, which to him is the relationship. And then it's basically saying, am I okay? Are we okay? Is she still here? His nervous system is tuned to her nervous system, and he's taking cues from her, which means the moment she gets anxious, the more anxious he gets. The moment she tests, he destabilizes, and she feels him destabilize. And now she doesn't feel safe. And then therefore she tests even harder, because now there's uncertainty, like crossing that bridge. She's like noticing like the board started like kind of flexing. There was a little wiggle in the handrail, and she's like, wait a second. Let me check that again. It's just wiggling it harder now to make sure that it's not just going to snap. Okay. This is the loop that destroys relationships. And it's not anyone's fault. It is two nervous systems triggering each other in a cycle that escalates until it breaks. And because most people can't see past the tip of their own nose, they blame the other person. The securely attached man, the man she eventually stops testing, has his identity rooted somewhere else besides her. And so it's not in her, it's not in the relationship, not in her opinion of him. He has what you might call an internal referencing system. He checks in with himself. He knows what he thinks, what he values, what he's doing, and why. Her bad mood is real to him, it matters to him, but it doesn't define or affect his sense of self. This is not coldness, though. Don't confuse this with being cold. It's not detachment, right? The cold, detached man also produces a specific kind of quiet in women, but it's the quiet of someone who's given up expecting warmth. That's not what we're after. What we're after is warmth without need, presence without dependence, the ability to be fully with someone without requiring something from them in every moment. Researcher John Gottman, the guy who predicted divorce with 94% accuracy from 15-minute interactions with couples, talks about what he calls emotional bids. And what he found was that the most stable relationships are the ones where both people can make emotional bids and not be destroyed when those bids aren't met. Where the rejection of a bid isn't the end of the world, where the person isn't so hungry for connection that they collapse when it isn't given. The man who is that hungry, and I say this with compassion because most of us have been that hungry, is the man she tests forever. Because hunger reads as scarcity, and scarcity reads as low value. And her nervous system is looking for the opposite. So, one second. So let me check in with you guys before we move on. We're going to talk about some framing, just seeing if there's any kind of questions. Oh, what's up, little one? I was just thinking about you and that recent thing that we that we had. Talking about this emotional bids and things like that. So we'll talk about that later. But moving on here about frame. Frame is not dominance performance. Okay. It's not the loudest voice in the room. It's not telling women what to do and waiting to see if she does it. It's not telling women and giving her instructions. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Okay. I'll explain. So men who confuse frame with control are missing the point entirely. And they tend to produce exactly the opposite of what they want, which is more resistance, more testing, and more chaos. And this has to do with reaching for control. Okay. I've mentioned this many times where control is an invitation. You're never just grasping for it and, kind of like forcing it upon her. Okay. Because what that's going to do is tighten that nervous system. All right. You don't want a tightening response. You want a further of letting go. You want a further of the softening. Okay. So you don't want the tightening because that turns to resistance, more testing, more chaos, and all that bullshit. So here's the first thing I want to correct about how frame is usually discussed. People talk about holding frame. Okay. This is and it's becoming popular. Like I'm seeing it on social media all over the place. Like guys talk about well, you got to hold frame. All right. It's incorrect. All right. Maintaining it, keeping it in place. And I understand why. It's intuitive shorthand. Okay. But it's also exactly wrong because anything you hold can be unheld. Anything you maintain can collapse. Anything you keep in place situationally when it's convenient, when you remember, when the pressure is low enough, is not frame. That's a performance of frame. Okay. The idea is that, okay, so look at it. Like I've said, basically framing is how you see reality. What if there's no difference between who you are and what perceives? Do you see? The way most guys are talking about holding frame, it's like something you borrow for the moment so that the woman doesn't walk all over you. How about it's just any moment at any time of day, she can't walk all over you because you're just that kind of person, because the way you see yourself and the world, like your sense of reality is just that way where it just doesn't get walked on. So it's not something that like you adopt and then like when she's not there, you kind of drop it and you go back to your regular self. Right? To me, that sounds tiring. You're borrowing. It's almost like cultural appropriation, you know? And then like trying to cast it off as like this is my natural way of doing things. And it's like what's going to happen is that let's say you start having regular interactions with the same girl. Maybe you get into somewhat of a relationship. You're going to get exhausted because you make an effort between yourself when you're not holding frame and self when you are holding frame. And you're psychologically going to get exhausted and eventually you're going to fumble. You're going to fumble this holding that you're doing and it's going to expose you. And she's going to go, you're not this guy. You're not the guy. This isn't it. The heat that I was that I was like feeling from that fireplace, it's not real. It was all fabricated so that you can feel like you're winning. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Real frame, okay? So when she's like, the thing is that when she feels the real thing and it comes into contrast, then it becomes really apparent of someone's performance. So she feels the difference in the way you feel the difference between like standing on solid ground and standing on something that's like shifting and moving when you move, right? Real frame is not something you carry. It is something that you are. It's just an extension of your identity. It cannot be separated from you any more than your spine can be separated from you. It doesn't turn on when she's watching and off when she's not. And it doesn't require effort to maintain because it's not maintained. It simply is. It's the shape of your character expressed consistently in every context, regardless of whether anyone is testing it or affirming it or even noticing it. And I see this. It's funny. Like I occasionally interact with people on Spaces on X, and there's like this group of guys that I've become familiar with, and there's much of this. There's much of this posturing, and it's like I've got a posture in this area, say like online, and then when I'm in this closed space with other guys, I'm this different way. And so what I was seeing, just as so you can kind of get a feel what I'm talking about, is this like very like bold, like masculine presenting, or what do they say, like masculine coded, right? Very like masculine coded, bro coded version of themselves in the public online space, but in the private online space, it's not there. And I'm like, okay, well, which one's the real one? And my guess obviously is the one that's out in the world for people to see. And it's like, how can you operate this way? Like, how can you, in my mind, I'm looking at this going, how do you not notice that you're just a circus clown? Like you're a circus performer. How are you not noticing that you're just playing yourself by wearing these different masks, by switching up, your coding, right? And depending on the situation you're in. How does that sit well with you? I don't understand. Like to me, that feels like a huge disrespect to myself. And I understand there are maybe particular situations where you do need to do this, but that shouldn't be like your regular everyday way of going about life. Like it's not fair to yourself, and you're never actually going to win. So this is why, okay, you can't think your way into frame. You can't adopt it. You can't adopt it as a strategy. It's not something you bring on. Okay, it's something you become. The man who has decided to have better frame, so to speak, and is not consciously executing that decision is still the man whose foundation is conditional. It's just a more sophisticated condition. The woman still feels it. She always feels it. So what you can do, and this is the honest answer, is become someone whose frame is real by doing the actual work of becoming that person, by knowing what you value and living by it, by being willing to lose things rather than compromise the core of who you are. by developing a relationship with yourself that is more fundamental than any relationship with anyone else. When that is real, frame is not something you have. Frame is something you cannot have. You can't not have. It's just an extension of who you are that's visible for others to see. And here's what almost nobody says about this. That quality of presence is an act of service. And I mean that seriously. When you have children and they're having a tantrum, the worst thing you can do is tantrum back. Not because you're better than them, but because someone has to be the ground. When a woman is in emotional chaos and you meet her chaos with your own chaos, you've abandoned the field. You've left her alone inside a storm. The man who stays rooted while she processes, who doesn't collapse, doesn't retaliate, doesn't go cold, is the man who actually is there for her in the way that she cannot verbalize but desperately needs. And that's not a power trip. That's love with a spine. And I'm not going to leave you in the abstract. So let me bring you into the physical for a second. What does the man who she tests look like concretely? He seeks reassurance in the middle of conflict. He explains himself too much when she's quiet. He changes his position when she expresses displeasure, not because he's reflected and genuinely changed, but because her displeasure is unbearable to him. He monitors her energy the moment he walks into the room. He adjusts himself to her temperature instead of bringing his own temperature. Every one of these behaviors, however, understandable, signals the same thing to her. I need you to be okay in order for me to be okay. And that transfers the weight of his emotional world onto hers. And she feels it. And she buckles under it. Or she tests it to see if she can put it back. What does the man she eventually stops testing look like? He walks into a room with his own energy. He is curious about hers, but not controlled by it, not affected by it. When she pushes, he doesn't collapse and he doesn't get rigid. He stays loose, slightly amused, interested. He has opinions he maintains under pressure, not belligerently, not dismissively, but just simply. He doesn't require her emotional approval to take action in his life. He lets her be in a bad mood without making it into a crisis. He sets the temperature of the interaction rather than always adapting to hers. And setting the temperature is kind of what I refer to when I say that colored glass dome over the interaction. And this is one of the one that surprises a lot of people. He receives her. He is genuinely interested. He listens without immediately problem solving or defending or trying to fix or offer something new or different. He can sit with her feelings without drowning in them, without being made tense by them. He is present, but not merged. That last distinction is subtle, but it's everything. The codependent man and the genuinely present man can look superficially similar. Both seem connected, but one is connected because he cannot stand the alternative. The other is connected because the connection is beautiful, and he has chosen it in this moment fully. Women know the difference, and they always know. Their nervous system is tuned for it. So here it is, kind of like wrapped up, and it's embarrassingly simple. The man she tests forever is the man whose identity lives in her hands. She has to keep checking whether he's real because he keeps deferring to her to define that. And she cannot rest in someone who cannot hold himself. The man she obeys, the man she wants to follow, the man to whom she surrenders, where she surrenders is an offering rather than a defeat, is the man who is so genuinely present in himself that she has nowhere to go but toward him. Not because he's dominating her, not because he's taken her choices away, but because in the presence of something truly solid, something in us, all of us, wants to rest. And the thing about like domination, I said it's not domination. The domination comes after that. Okay. So it's the process of her like being drawn to you. Then there's a softening. And then once the softening, then there's the reshaping due to your dominance. Okay. The dominance is like the mold, right? It's the, a lot of molds, they're made out of aluminum, right? like it's a cast. So you can constantly pour in, um, liquid metals. Well, actually, those are made out of plaster. But when the cast is made out of, say, aluminum, you can put in like make a wax casting. You can, all different types of casting, plaster casting inside them, and so that's kind of what happens, right? It becomes liquid, and it forms to your container. Okay, but that's where the domination comes into play. Domination is a shaping. Okay, it's not like imposing your will. It's having a shape, and she forms into it. That's really what it is. And then from there, that's the interesting thing, though. That cast, right? That aluminum cast is not a fixed shape. It can change shape. So now you're like, it's an evolving shape. So, and this comes down to your own self-awareness, your choices, how you're growing as a dominant. And so, while you can maintain that, she will just adapt and adapt and adapt. Okay. I mean, unless you take a turn for the worse, and now, it's kind of like turned her nervous system back on, and and that happens. It happens from time to time. Okay. So don't just think like, oh, once I'm there, it's easy street. It's not. Your awareness actually has to get tighter, sharper, and never really off. But you trip. Everybody trips. I trip. Like I made a mistake recently that I had to apologize for, and but that's just part of it. Okay, because that's the growth of awareness. You say, okay, I'm aware of that now. I can't. I need to change the shape, and now I need to assume different responsibilities, different thoughts, different actions, or like add this awareness to myself. Okay, so the domination is not about like getting her to do what you want, right? That's a small ambition, and small ambitions will make you small. This is about becoming the kind of person whose life is so real, so grounded, so intentional that proximity to it is itself nourishing. Just being near it is nourishing. And men like that don't chase women for like whatever reason. Don't chase her for sex, don't chase her for validation, don't chase her for emotional stimulation, don't chase her for validation. Like none of it. Like no chasing whatsoever. None of it. For what? Right? Because that chasing is due to like a need, right? A psychological or emotional need, even the physical stuff. So it's like if you don't have those needs, because those needs are usually set up from something very old, childhood type stuff, right? That if you kind of no longer are operating from that, right? In the same way where like the guy is adjusting to her, right? What I mentioned before, he's constantly adapting his temperature to hers, his nervous system to hers. Okay. You're no longer adapting your nervous system or your behavior sets or your thought patterns from your previous self, your young self. Okay. You're no longer adjusting to that temperature. And this makes you a different man. This makes you feel different in your presence. And this is like what they're after, whether they can put it into words or not. Like girls, this is what they're after. They're after your stillness, right? But it's like not heavy stillness, right? It's light stillness. And there's just some kind of like magic to it because it makes her feel lighter. It makes her let go her grip. And you end up like teaching her something about herself without actually really even opening your mouth. So, so like I said, this is about becoming the kind of person whose life is so real and grounded and intentional that being next to you feels gravitational, it feels nourishing, and it feels relaxing. But also, it's intense, right? Because if you're adding it to this lifestyle, you can now like intensify certain things by adding in sexuality, adding in positive tension, sometimes negative tension, um, depending on the situation. And it becomes extremely intense, right? Like emotions become, very, very wide, like the spectrum becomes thicker and wider. just much more potent, I would say. All right. So, like I said, like guys like this, like they're not performing. They're not trying to pass tests or anything like that. They don't win them, right? And they don't perform a version of themselves when it matters and then drop it when no one's looking. They just are. And she notices. The testing stops not because you defeated them, okay, but because you outgrew needing to. That's really the whole point. All right. Be Will. What's up, man? All right. What do you got here, Hamza? I knew a Hamza many years ago. How long into meeting her do you start to deal with her chaos? I presume you're talking about women who are already vetted and not girls we just meet. No, it's all the same. It's a good question. But I'm going to deal with a woman the same way I do day 1 to day 1000. Like it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Because I'm the same. Okay. I'm the constant here. Okay. She's the variable. So it doesn't matter like whether she's showing me chaos when we first meet or chaos down the road, right? It's all dealt with the same way. Okay. And it really depends on like what it is. Okay. So like, because I don't really know what you mean by chaos. The hell was that? So I don't really know what you mean by chaos. Does that mean like her having strong emotions, right? Because some guys will think that's chaos, right? Like, oh my gosh, she's had a bad day at work. It's so chaotic in the apartment, um, and they can't handle it. So to them, that feels very chaotic. Um, and then other guys, their idea of chaos is is like her losing her shit and like pouring sugar in your gas tank. Okay. Like that's chaos. So it depends on who you're asking. Now, if you're like the guy that I was, the better side, right, the man that she obeys, there's really nothing that's perceived as chaos. Okay, so like you hear me talk about women as squirrels. Um, Basically, the reason why I do that is not to minimize them. Not really. It's really to help minimize what you think of them. All right. And in doing so, it's to bring down the importance of how you perceive girls and making them special creatures, right? When in reality, they're just creatures. Okay. There's no difference between us and the frogs and the antelope and the chimpanzees and the elephants and the fish. Okay. We're all just a bunch of creatures. Okay. The only difference about us that we know so far is that we have the ability to self-reflect, right? We have this concept of I, and if you really go down that road, it's completely false. Like it's a complete mirage. It's made up. It's just if you kind of tap it the right way, the whole fucking thing crumbles down, right? Your sense of self is not what you think it is. All right. So it's just kind of funny how we think we're all these special creatures because we think and communicate and we create these sophisticated worlds that we live in. And the reality is we're just animals amongst animals. And this is how I look at women. I don't think they're special, but I also don't think that they're not special. Like, do I think deer are special? No, not really, but they're not like garbage. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a deer. It is what it is. And that's not saying it with a chip on my shoulder either. It's not saying like, oh, like girls, they are what they are. And some guys will say that with a chip on their shoulder, like they're kind of bitter about it, like because they wish they were something else, you know. And this is the root of anxiety. Did you know that the root of anxiety is not accepting things for what they are and wishing they were something else? Like that's what it creates tension inside you. That's really what tension and anxiety is just not accepting things as they are, but without bitterness. All right. I think people bring too much bitterness into their acceptance of things because they wish it were different. And it's like, no, you're not quite accepting it then, are you? It's not real acceptance. Acceptance without judgment. And so when you're in that state, like, what is actual chaos? Like, can a deer act chaotic, right? I mean, unless it's behaving in a way that's not typical of a deer. If it starts like walking on just two legs through the woods, you're like, whoa, okay, like that's chaotic. It would have to be something really unusual that's outside the purview of its natural behaviors. Okay. But most organisms throughout the day, throughout the weeks and years and so on, they pretty much behave within the realms of what you'd expect of that organism. Okay. Usually things don't pop up that are bizarre. And when they do, it's an anomaly, right? It's not the norm. And so so women are just the same. It's just the same shit. So can anything they do actually be considered chaotic? Not really. Not from that view. The only reason why guys think that it's chaotic is because your nervous system can't handle it. It because of the searching for temperature and making sure that her temperature is okay so that your temperature can feel okay. And that's really the problem, you know. Um, it's it's a very limiting thing, right? It prevents you from being relaxed. It prevents you from being free, um, and basically like having the ability to pretty much do what you want, feel what you want, think what you want. Um, because it's always being affected. It's always being gauged and altered by whatever she's got going on, whether it's chaos or joy or love or sadness or anger. It's always being altered, right? And you might be thinking, well, why did he add joy to that? you know, isn't a girl in a good mood a good thing, right? And it's like, yeah, but it's just a thing. Like her moods are just things, right? So you can be thrown off your square by her joy just as much as you can be thrown off your square by her sorrow or her anger, right? Or her confusion or whatever. Like in any case, no matter what it is, you should be able to just calmly sit on your square and not be moved by that. Now, occasionally, yes, you might be bumped and you like kind of like sway a little bit, but depending on how you handle that determines whether your feet stay still or you take a step off. And when you take that step off, uh, depending on your self awareness, you're going to be really keen on what you've just done, and it's going to be very apparent to you that they've kind of like stepped out of line, and this is a good thing. Okay, it's a good thing to have that level of self awareness. We're like, oh fuck, like I I just moved when I shouldn't have, when I didn't need to. And this is the thing, like a lot of the reactions that guys do, they don't need to. They don't need to do these things. Like the way you naturally react is not necessary at all. They're just conditioned responses, typically out of discomfort. So this is why, like in my school, where we spend a lot of time discussing and reminding oneself to become comfortable with tension. And so this is why I'm constantly saying, like, go talk to girls, talk to girls, talk to girls, get into these conversations, okay? Because it's a very oh geez, it's an arena of interaction with very few variables. Like all it is just text on a screen, okay? And yes, there's nuances and there's some psychology involved in there, but it's pretty limited, okay? And so it's a good training ground that's sort of like simplified, that allows your nervous system to kind of adapt, right? And like I've got a guy who fucking shits his pants every time the girl says something and he doesn't know what to say. Like he's like right on the verge of shitting his pants. And it's like, all right, just keep going, keep getting into that thing so you can show your nervous system that it's not the end of the world, that you're not going to break, you're not going to shatter. Okay. Like you can sit there, and if you don't know what to say, and just sit there and feel that tension and let it cook you, right? Because the cooking is what builds the calluses, right? It deadens the nerves a little bit, and what allows you to sustain. Like back when I was in the temple, we had this period where like Sifu came out and he asked if anyone wanted to take on the iron palm, right? If they wanted to create the iron palm, and a few of us did, right? And so he's like, okay, and he brought in like all this equipment. He brought in this like big fucking iron I-beam. I don't know how he got it in the school. The thing must have weighed so fucking much. But it was this big, like 10-foot long iron I-beam, and set it up on like these cinder blocks. I got that. He had these various walks filled with different types of sediment. So like he had like gravel in one, like this like sharp gravel with like pieces like much bigger than most coarse salts that you can buy. And then just slowly, like I think it was like four of them, four of these walks, and each one had like a smaller and smaller grain. Okay, so it went from coarse, and then the last one was just this really fine sand. And each of these was sitting on an electric heater, like for cooking, like an electric stovetop. Okay. So it was heating the wok and heating the stuff that was inside it. And we had to sit there like in a horse stance and just knead, or like we kind of jam our fingers in and start kneading the hot rocks and the gravel and the sand. And just over time. And we also had like this pattern that we had to do with our hands, like with different strikes. So basically you hit like all the possible angles you could make in your hand, like into a weapon, like a knife hand, claws, fists, slapping, like all the different positions. And you just do this like over and over and over and over and over. And then we stand over by the I-beam and just lightly hit it. Just lightly, just bing, 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 just over and over and over. Okay. And before you know it, like our hands turned into like rocks, basically. I mean, we could still move them and stuff like that, but we didn't feel as much. Like my sense of touch went away I would say I lost like 50% of my feeling in my hands. It was tremendous. And by the end of it, we could go to like a pot of boiling water and reach in and grab an egg, like an egg that was boiling in the water. We'd grab it without burning ourselves. I mean, the skin would turn pink, but we wouldn't feel the burn and the skin wouldn't get damaged. And so it's like that. Like if we had gone in with heavy hands, we would get injuries. And then you'd have to like stop, heal yourself, start the training all over. So the idea is you have this very slow, gentle exposure to tension, pressure, heat, friction, all this stuff to slowly build your skin, or the skin on your mind, your spirit, all that stuff, to build some resilience, okay, to these external stimuli that could otherwise be damaging if they were really strong. But you're taking it in little bits, little bit over time, and before you know it, you can fucking punch a hole in a tree and grab boiling eggs out of water. So in the same way, this is one of the things that we do at the school. We're constantly putting ourselves in these situations, basically just like talking to girls, because that's, basically what a lot of these guys want. But doing this repeatedly over and over and over to feel that tension. And of course, all the while we're spending time building the self-awareness. So it's not just like, oh, I feel this way. You're feeling this way, but also observing yourself feeling this way. And there's something magical that happens when you start observing your reactions to things. It becomes much harder to have those reactions over time, because you're like, wait a second, and also like learning lessons and gaining understanding. And then after a while, you start having these reactions, like they become less and less and less, in the same way that the heat from those walks started bothering my skin less and less and less. I could keep my hands in that hot sand for minutes on end without feeling anything. And so it's the same sort of thing. So when the girl says something that's unexpected, or she tests and it does nothing, it's nothing. It might as well be just any other kind of set of words put together, right? And you just handle them the way you would anything else. And that's the goal. Like that's the real goal here, is to just be the same. And so this circles right back to this question here from Hamza, right? How long into meeting her do you start to deal with her chaos? You already started before you even met her. That's what it is. Because you're the thing that can handle any situation, because you don't change and shift and change your temperature or your nervous system or how you see things. You're not changing and shifting, right? You're comfortable. You're just comfortable right where you are. You don't need to be anywhere else. And the temperature is just fine. So, consider that. Great question. Probably the longest answer you'll ever hear on YouTube. Yeah. Well, thank you, Uncle Guns. Appreciate that. Yeah, thank goodness, these are recorded, yeah. Because you can go back and take notes and understand the stuff. It's interesting. It's like it's not like super complex stuff. You know what I mean? I'm not breaking any new ground here. You know what I mean? But it's just a matter of just how you look at things. There's I mentioned that story, that old story of this the monk who's walking, he's like walking the woods, and this boy runs up to him. He's like, monk, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah, sure. He's like, what's it like being enlightened? And the monk stops and thinks for just a second. He goes, well, everything's pretty much the same, but you're 3 inches off the ground. and it's like that. Like this isn't about new ideas, new concepts. There's nothing new under the sun. All the shit that I'm talking about, it's hundreds or thousands of years old, right? Nothing new. It's just recontextualized. And the whole idea is to just be able to look at the same shit from a slightly different angle. Just a 3-inch rise, and your perspective on things is all different because you have now a higher vantage point. It's only 3 inches, but that changes the vectors of everything. And that's all you need to do. It's really funny, like the shift from the man she obeys and the man that she tests. That shift is so subtle. And I know one of my guys is in here right now. Well, is he still in here? Like it's not these like monumental breakthroughs. I mean, yes, there are some aha moments, but it's like, it's not this like groundbreaking new philosophy or anything like that, right? To shift between like the sucky version of yourself to the grounded version of yourself is such a tiny little shift, but it changes fucking everything. And it's just a little shift inside you, and then you come to realize like the truth of the statement. Shout out to the fellas, well, to Steve mainly, when he says, the game is not about women. And when you really start taking this seriously, you really start feeling that. You're like, holy fuck, like this, they mean nothing to the game. Nothing. It's just a pathway to get to the truth of yourself. That's it. And there's many pathways. You can find enlightenment washing dishes, but it'll take long. It'll take a long time. But there's something about, like I said, women are a microcosm of the world. There's something about interacting with a girl that will show you yourself faster than any religious practice, any spiritual path, any philosophy that you adopt. It will show you yourself so fucking fast, provided your ego will allow it. That's the trick. That's the magic trick right there. Will your ego allow you to see the truth of yourself? Can you handle it? Can you handle that tension? And if you can't, you're fucked. Because that's the only way through. That's the only way to get through to the other side, where you actually are, the real self, right? It's actually hiding behind your fear. It's hiding behind your excuses, hiding behind your weird beliefs and your weird perceptions and all that jazz, right? And it's just there, like fucking pure. pure fucking gold. All right. But you got to get through the pain. You got to get through the fear. You have to get through your anger. You have to get through your stupid fucking beliefs. Right. But you get through that and you're like, boom, there you are. And it's like it's not an easy journey, but when you get there, it's the most comfort, like the most comfort you'll ever feel in your life. It's like, I don't know, coming back home to like very loving parents. And they're like, hey, good to see you, and it's like that feeling, maybe with like less excitement, perhaps. Um, Alexander, it's a combination of progressive conditioning of the hands, tendon strengthening, and healing with Ditta Jiao. Yes. Oh, man. So you did the training, that smell. Oh, the smell of Ditta Jiao. Just that smell brings back so many memories, man. Man, we had so many bottles of that shit. Ditta Jiao. Yeah, man. Fucking A. I actually love the smell of that shit. Like now, you know what I mean? Because it just, for months, I was just smelling it. Oh, but for those who don't know, so Ditta Jiao is this Chinese like liquid. It's like herbs and shit blended into with fluids, and it's this dark brown stuff. And I can't even describe the odor, but slightly vinegar-ish, maybe like a little bitter, a little smoky, very like, I don't know, just a lot of herbs and shit in there. And you put it on your hands, like you kind of pour it on your hands and rub it around, and it like stains your hands, and just you smell it constantly. But it's not disgusting; it's just potent, and it helps condition the skin. Like after like basically beating the skin constantly. But yeah, it was, man. For that phrase brings back memories. But yeah, so it's just slow progression. But the key to it though is consistency and mindfulness, right? Is taking it, and that means like you're taking it seriously. And what that means is that you're taking yourself seriously, but not in such like a bold way. Like people think like, okay, when I take something serious, I have to put a lot of energy in. I have to be bold. I have to show people or show myself that I'm taking it seriously. It's something that I would like in my past, people would have a lot of contention with, like, especially, in my long ago when I was married, she would feel, like if something would come up, okay, some sort of like issue, something that needed attention, right? It was serious. It was a serious thing. And she would get into that tension, feel that tension. And I wouldn't react in the same way. And because I didn't react with intensity, she felt as though I wasn't taking it seriously. But quite the contrary, I just wasn't having an emotional reaction to it. Okay. But this is what some people think. Okay. They think like, okay, if I'm not being like raw about whatever it is, then that means I'm not taking it seriously. And I have to be like raw in order to take it seriously. But you don't. Okay. You don't have to have any sort of emotions about it whatsoever. To take something seriously, you just have to be mindful, have good intentions, and be consistent. Right? That's it. That's taking something seriously. I mean, think about it, like if you want to be a good piano player, like, do you need to have a mood about it? No, you just have to be mindful, have good intentions, and be consistent, and just do the practice, right? Treat it as a practice, because eventually, whatever sort of like emotion that got you, inspired to do something, right? That's going to go away, right? That's what happens with consistency, because after a while, it's like those feelings go away. Your inspiration or whatever was motivating you. Sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it's desperation. Sometimes it's, well, all sorts of stuff. Okay, but those feelings, they're transient, just like everything, and that goes away. And what's left is your will. You know what I mean? Your will, your mindfulness, your intentions, and your consistency. That's what brings you through. There's, like you can't wait to be inspired. Like that's not the way. You know what I mean? The way is just doing what's what's necessary. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's yeah, and that's something I guess that I learned like in the temple. It's like it doesn't matter like how you feel, right? Like you want to be able to do fucking like 2-finger handstand push-ups. Like you don't wait till you're feeling good about it. You just have to fucking do it if that's what you really want to do, you know? Um and there's going to be times when you don't want to do these things, right? But you still do them. I don't feel like practicing piano. Well, you're going to fucking sit down and practice for an hour. You know what I mean? Like I just started learning Vietnamese. It's fucking hard. Like there's like 3 or 4 different ways to say the letter A. And it's just these very subtle shifts in tone. And I learned, there's one phrase. I'm not going to say it in Vietnamese because it'll sound bad, but basically, it's in English is "this is my dad," right? If you're like introducing someone to your dad, you say like "this is my dad." But if you say the word for dad with it's supposed to have a rising like A sound, right? Or a rising O sound, something like that. But if that vowel has a falling accent, you're basically saying, here is my you're introducing your concubine, right? Or your mistress or something like that. And apparently like in Vietnam, like mistress or your side person, doesn't matter if they're male or female. It's just called like their mistress or this side piece or whatever. So it could be like, this is my dad or this is my side piece. Just by having this very slight tonal inflection change on the dad part. It's very interesting. But that's kind of like the larger point is that it's not about big moves. It's not about, and this is part of like the whole performance thing and performative masculinity and working hard to like pass her tests and I'm going to learn this technique and over here and on this side of Reddit and I read all this like stuff about POA and like what to do with these crazy shit tests that these bitches put out here. It's not about like adopting this stuff, like because it's just going to muddy the fucking waters. You're going to cloud your head. I've got a student who's like that. He studied way too much of this stuff, thinking it's going to make him the man that he wants to be, simply by way of becoming good with girls. And what do I say, hockey check? Right? Like, money solves money problems. Fitness solves fitness problems. Okay, like you can't take these things and use them to solve other problems. Okay, so like he was not hockey check, but this other guy, he was learning like these communication skills to solve his woman problem, right? Thinking like, okay, if I learn all these techniques, these seduction techniques, and these like shit test dissolving techniques and all this stuff, then I'll get good with women. Okay. But that's not the reason why you're bad with women, right? Like it'd be better to question, okay, why am I bad with girls? Right. Rather than what do I do to become good with girls? Do you see what I'm saying? Like what put you in this position of wanting to seek outside of yourself for the answer in the first place? So that really brings into the question of like, kind of like going in the other direction, okay, and looking inside and saying, okay, well, why am I in this place to begin with? Why do I suffer at the hands of women, right? Without them even trying. Like they're not even aware that they're making me suffer and I'm suffering. There's a lot of guys, man. And then you think that she's attacking you because, you've got like a conditioned victim sort of mentality. And I can't remember who I was saying this to, but to people who identify with like victim energy, anything can feel like a weapon. Any person can feel like an assailant if you just do that to them. If you put them in that position, you can shift anything, and so it's a hard place to be. Like I'm sympathetic to those who are. Who are in that position, because I imagine that's a very stressful way to live, but it's not about like, like adopting these things. It's not big moves. It's very subtle things that you do with yourself. Very subtle. Um, and it's really kind of like getting through the side of dealing with yourself actually requires a gentle hand, right? Um, Having gentleness with yourself, having patience, right? This is really the only way through. You cannot muscle your way into becoming a better man. Okay. You can muscle your way into those external things like, finances solves financial problems, muscles solves fitness problems, or like cardio or whatever, like, a wardrobe solves wardrobe problems. And those are all great problems to solve. All right. But it's not going to solve the problem of you. It's not going to really fundamentally change how you feel about yourself. Sure, it can raise your self esteem. Okay. But like, let's say you have like a drastic change with your physique, right? Eventually, that's going to be your normal and it will no longer do what it did to you emotionally. You can, drastically change your wardrobe. And for a while, you're gonna be like, I fucking feel like $1,000,000. Well, after a while, those clothes are gonna be your regular clothes. And then you're gonna want that bump again. So you kind of phase those out and I gotta, ramp up my wardrobe again, right? So you go for that bump. And now you feel great. You feel like $1,000,000, and then that starts to peter out, right? And becomes normal. And you're like, yeah, these are just my duds. This is just what I wear, whatever. Even if someone says like, "Hey, that's a great fucking jacket," you're like, "Ah, this whole thing," and you're not being like modest. It's just like it no longer has the juice that it once did. Okay, even with girls, guys, they do the same thing with girls, right? And it's really not the fault of the thing. It's not the fault of your fitness. The fault of your wardrobe. It's not the fault of girls. Even though guys will blame them and say, "Oh, girls are just fucking boring," like they're supposed to fucking entertain you or some shit, which they can, which, when they're very submitted and they want to make you happy all the time and things like that. But that's a totally different topic. Okay. But, it's trying to use these like external things to solve the self problem. And it's just not going to work. You need the self to solve the self problem. The problem is that the self that's doing the work is the one that's fucked up. So it's like trying to pull up yourself by your own bootstraps. Or as Alan Watts says, touch the tip of your finger with the very same finger. Okay. He who is being examined is also the one who is sick. Or I'm sorry, the one who is examining is the one who is sick. So it's tough, like a surgeon trying to stitch himself up. So that's where guides come in. This is where teachers come in. This is where, good family members come in who you can entrust to yourself too, being like basically admitting, I cannot see all of myself. And that's impossible. None of us can. All right. And that's just a part of the human condition, is that we do not have full and complete awareness of ourselves. And that's also a good thing. Okay. Because that gives us a constant path of progression. We're never done, which is a great thing. Imagine like if you got to a point where you're like, I'm done, right? You probably wouldn't do anything. You probably just stand there or sit there, do nothing. Right? You'd have no thoughts, nothing to say. You were just completely one with yourself and your environment, like a frog just sitting there on a lily pad, just doing nothing. So it's good that we don't have that full and complete awareness of ourselves, because it always gives us something to work on, right? We're always gaining greater insight, saying, oh, I didn't realize that about myself. And like, that's interesting, and you just keep going, right? Or you have a guide, right? To point things out. And then these light bulbs turn on and you say, oh, okay, I didn't see that in myself, right? And sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's really funny. Sometimes it's inspiring, but that's just the nature of things. And it's a good thing. But if you're scared of that stuff, if you're scared of discomfort, right? if you don't like, feeling pain, this path is not for you. Like, just go off and become rich, like fuck everything, just do a bunch of drugs, like fuck a bunch of bitches, and then just kind of, I don't know, die with your face in a pile of cocaine. Like, you know what I mean? Like just fuck it. You know what I mean? Because you're living on the surface, and that's the choice that you're making. And that's fine. You know what I mean? There's plenty of people who are like that. But do not assume that you are him, right? I don't mean him in like that, like, oh wow, him, like not like that. Like that you have that you've actually become yourself. Like don't assume that, like you've maintained the surface, and that's perfectly fine. Like there's plenty of people who do that. We need people like that. It kind of helps the world go round. But don't assume that you're a man with like the capital M. Don't assume that you've paved this nice life with these bricks of honesty that many of them fucking sucked to lay into the ground. It sucked. Where you're like, damn, that's when I was being like this. Damn, that's when I was being like that. Damn, I used to think this. Damn, I currently think this. Damn, 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 damn. And because it's just awareness, 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 awareness. Damn, I'm feeling bad about this realization and I shouldn't be. Another brick, and it's like a weird form of masochism almost. Okay. But again, think about it. Like if somebody who didn't know about kung fu and I told them that what I was doing for 6 months while I was living in the temple, they'd be like, are you insane? Like what's wrong with you? What is wrong with, like, if they looked at all the training that we did, they'd be like, you people have some serious mental problems. Why are you doing this to your bodies? It's insane. And so like there's got to be like a little bit of pleasure in the pain, maybe the adventure of it or something, I don't know, but there's like you have to bring that in, right? Because if you think it's a slog, then that means you're waiting for it to end. And I've got news, it's never going to end. Never. Never. This path, okay, like the path of man, right? It is endless until your heart stops. Endless. So get used to it now. Get used to the discomfort now. And the fact that you do feel periods of discomfort shows that you are experiencing periods of growth, awareness, right? Realize you're not what you think you are. And that's a good thing because you're coming into, a brighter area, right? The fog is clearing. You may not like what you see, and that's fine. And sometimes you might love what you see, right? That's just the part of understanding yourself, but it's about getting to see everything, not just the good stuff, everything. And you just accept it all. And this is like when you're like really coming to like a full acceptance of everything what you are. But it's it's not easy. It's not always fun. But the process, yeah, I would say like bring in some kind of sense of like, I like this. Almost in the, like when you go to the gym, like our bodies don't like going to the gym. You know what I mean? Like it's, to some people it's fun, but to them it's become fun. Like they kind of enjoy the discomfort. They enjoy the pain. They enjoy the shaking that is involved, right? Geez, like there were so many times like that when I was like training that hard in the temple, and the body was like, give up already. Like I'm done. And your mind is like, no, you're not done. Right. And I can hear my teacher walking around the room going, more chi, more chi, more chi. Right. And the body's like, fuck you. I'm done. Right. But it's like kind of getting into that, maybe with a little less fervor. There's difference between like hard kung fu training and like, this stuff, mental stuff. Like I said, there's a bit of gentleness to it, right? Because if you come in too hard, you'll run into walls, right? And there's going to be a reaction to that, right? So that's why it's it's a slow path. Okay. But trust me, like you get to the side of like the relaxation, freedom, your mind is just way more relaxed and open. Now you're what happens is you kind of like open up your ability to create, and there's nothing really holding you back, right? And so that's where, when we get into things like creating power exchange relationships, you start bringing in BDSM and things like that, it gets you can just express so much creativity to the point where you're like, "Oh, okay, what do I do first?" Right? Because there's so many ideas and so many things you can do. And it's like you've got limited time and energy. So you really have to kind of like it becomes like a problem solving thing, but it's a fun, creative, like sexy thing that you are now doing. Um, it's a I don't know. It's just a really cool thing where you're not held back by anything. You're not held back by doubt. You're not held back by shame. You're not held back by fear. Um, you're not held back by guilt, right? Or thinking that this is this or that or whatever sort of like perception that you could have, right? It's just not there. And so there's just a tremendous amount of freedom in this. Okay. And that's part of the reason why I'm writing the book that I'm writing, because when I don't know if anybody like has studied Taoism at all, but it's very much about getting to the like a position of harmony, much in the same way that the frog and the deer are harmonious with the flow of nature, right? Like there's no like real separation between animals and nature. They're part of it, right? They're all part of this like ecosystem. And it's almost like humans have like detached from that. And we're like, if humans went away, the earth would probably benefit, right? Like we're not like this intrinsic linked in thing. You know what I'm saying? Like with the whole like honeybees thing. I don't know if is that still a big deal, like with honeybees, all right? Um, but if like honeybees were to go away, it would send a fucking chain reaction throughout the whole ecosystem, and we'd be fucked, right? And so, but if humans, like we're not connected in that sort of way. But with like Taoism, it's sort of like it's a practice in getting your mind and your spirit and your behaviors to kind of get as blended back in as possible, right? But it comes mostly from like mental states and behavior and things like that. But but that's why I'm writing that book, because like that's what I've found through this. I found a tremendous amount of freedom and a sense of I don't know how to describe it, like the seamlessness that the deer feels with his environment. That's how I feel. Like there's a seamlessness. It's like everything is in the right place. Everything belongs. Everything is, right? Um and just like what Lao Tzu is saying, like it's really difficult to even put into words, because it's beyond language. But when you're in it, you're like, oh yeah, I'm in it. And someone's like, well, what's it? You're like, I really can't explain, but it feels fine, right? Like a summer breeze makes me feel fine. I found in my experience that unfucking yourself is 10 times more difficult than adding in great habits. Yep, absolutely. And this is really the path, right? And so many guys have it backwards, and this is what the whole performative masculinity thing is, right? Trying to add in, like I want to show myself, I want to, like make it look like I'm the guy, you know. Spend a whole fucking lifetime trying to convince others, right? Amassing various things to convince others that you're the guy or you're one of the guys, and really it comes by way of unfucking yourself. But in order to do that, like you have to be willing to look into your darkest corners, the darkest corners where your pain is, where your fear is, where your rage is, right? And admit that it's there. Like that's one of the hard parts, you know. Not just looking into it, but like just admitting that it's fucking there. That's tough. But you've got time. You're not dead yet, you know, and there's always going to be girls, right? But the thing is that there's not always going to be you, right? So, it's like get on the ball. You know what I mean? Like the games can wait. The video games can wait. The TV shows can wait. Um, the distractions, basically, the distractions can wait. Social media can fucking wait. Social media can fucking wait until the cows come home. Like you have no fucking business playing with that drug if you don't have a business attached to it. You have no business whatsoever playing with that drug. It does fuck all. Actually, it does more than fuck all. It actually does a lot, but in detrimental ways. So this is what I'm going to do. What day is it today? Today's Monday. Okay. So I challenge you, and if you don't have a business, right? I challenge you to not use a single piece of social media until Sunday night. From now until Sunday night. That's what I challenge you to do. No Twitter, no IG, no TikTok, right? I think like things that don't have like moving images or photos are fine. So like Reddit, I kind of wouldn't consider social media because it doesn't like get in your head in the same way. That visual stuff with the music and the pacing and the visuals and all that stuff, like that's highly tailored stuff. But like Reddit is just people talking. They're just kind of like putting shit out there. But and Twitter could be the same, but it's not. Like there's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of videos, a lot of advertisements. They're not flashing advertisements on Reddit. Or regular messaging. You got friends on WhatsApp. Like I don't consider that to be social media either. So, but like any visual stuff, okay, like X, IG, TikTok, and whatever else, Snapchat, Kick. I wouldn't bother with any of that stuff. Okay. So my challenge is to do not engage with any of that unless you have a business attached to it for the rest of the week until Sunday night. That's the challenge. All right, guys, I'm going to close this one up. I really appreciate you joining me this evening. I hope the discussion was helpful. I hope the lecture was helpful. And if you have any questions, just go to the website, the dominanceacademy.com, and just hit the contact right at the top and just write me an email and we can have a conversation if there's anything you have questions about, anything you'd like to add, right? So if you have like show ideas, if you've got topics you'd like to talk about, maybe you've got a question that you want to ask here but are feeling a little bashful, but you want it answered, put it in the contact area, and if I like it, maybe we'll develop a show off of that. No, come on, man. Asking question like right at the last second. What are your thoughts on psychedelics and confronting those dark parts of yourself? It may or may not work, right? There's no guarantee. Psychedelics are great, or they can be great. They can also be incredibly fucking horrifying. I've had some of the best trips of my entire life on acid. And then I've had some of the most scariest moments I've ever had psychologically on psychedelics. One of the best ones was actually my first trip on acid that I ever took. It was my senior year of high school. And me and my well, I'll call him C, me and my friend C, we were in the art class. And my art teacher, because she was fucking awesome, she was the one who kind of brought me to an appreciation for fine art. Okay. And so it was the end of the year trip. And we all fundraiser for like a bus. And we all went to New York City, okay, from upstate New York. And so we were going to go to museums. We were going to St. John the Divine Cathedral. I think like it's one of the largest cathedrals in the world. And and just kind of bop around, right? Seeing like a lot of great art. We went to the MoMA, we went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, all that good shit. And we put the little tab of white paper on our tongue 30 minutes before arriving to New York City. And we step off the bus and it's like, boom, fucking hits us. And like LSD is no joke. Like it's not this like smooth roll, like the way like mushrooms can be. Mushrooms feel very physical. Okay. LSD is incredibly cerebral, right? Yeah, you feel it in your body, but it's really fucking cerebral. And we step off that bus and we're just like bashed in the head with a fucking sledgehammer. And we look at each other. Our pupils are like the size of fucking dinner plates. And the first stop is going to St. John the Divine Cathedral. And it was before all the tourists got there. Like we got to New York and like very early. Okay. So it was our first stop. Nobody was in there but us students. So it's like dead quiet, like, you know, just kind of like murmuring amongst each other and stuff. And we walk in there and it's like, it's dim, you know, as like cathedrals are, you know, very beautiful. But one of the things that LSD does is it liquefies things. So especially like patterns. So if there's like a pattern, say like on a rug or, you know, even like a pattern of like tree bark, it starts swimming. It starts to have like this like swimming effect. And so we're looking at the floor because it's like stone and stuff kind of had a pattern. The floor just started turning to liquid, you know, and I'm hearing my feet like splash as though there's like maybe like a half inch of water on it as I'm walking, but it's stone. Like stone's not supposed to be liquid. And inside there's these enormous fucking stone pillars. The diameter of them, geez, had to have been at least like 9 feet. 8 feet, something like that. Just huge fucking stone pillars, like holding up the ceiling, you know? And we both walk up to one and we're like, well, like feeling it and shit. And we look up and the whole thing just starts shimmering and like as if it's turning into water. And we're like looking at each other like, dude, we got to get out of here. Like if this is going to come down, you know? So we start bugging out. And we left. We had sat outside in the sun on the stairs and waiting for the tour to end. But then like the intensity kind of like subsided a little bit and we went to the Met and holy shit, like the visual, it like, like the extra emphasis that the LSD did to the paintings we were looking at, just these masterworks, dude. Like it's almost as if like the painters, they knew that people would be looking at these on LSD and they made them look a certain way so they'd be extra beautiful. It was just amazing, you know. But then again, like I've also had like really bad trips and like almost traumatizing, at least in the moment. Nothing lasting really, but they can be great learning tools. Okay, but they can also just be a bunch of shit. And you know, I listened to, you know, I was reading Bruce Lee's biography like many years ago in high school. And Bruce Lee was hanging out with James Coburn, right? Because he was, you know, starting to rub shoulders with like Hollywood people. And James was like, hey, you know, have you ever tried marijuana? And he's like, no, I haven't. And he's like, all right, cool. Like, you know, so take a seat. I'm going to make us some marijuana tea. And so he made some marijuana tea for him and Bruce. And so they're sitting there drinking it and, you know, they got high and they started having conversation and all that stuff. And then like after it subsided and they kind of like went back to the normal selves, he's like, so like, what did you think? And Bruce thought for a second. He's like, well, you know, it's not bad, but it gets you there too quickly. And he had a great point, you know, because what drugs and I believe marijuana is like it's considered like a low grade psychedelic. And the thing is with psychedelics is that it shoots your consciousness only far beyond your heart, your spirit, your body. Like none of that has caught up. It just like rockets your fucking your consciousness into like states that you can't even imagine, right? That would probably take lifetimes for your heart and your spirit and your body to get to, you know? And so he's like, yeah, it's great, but you know, it brings you there too quickly. And like there was like in italics, you know what I mean? So So with that said, it's like, sure, they can have some benefits, but it's not going to last, right? Because everything kind of has to move together, right? Which is why we cannot just kick around theory, right? Like in these lectures, like you cannot just keep, sure, it's like entertaining or whatever. It's like great info, but you cannot just keep something as theory. Like you have to put action into this. You have to engage your heart, you have to engage your body, you have to engage your spirit, as well as your reasoning, your intellect, and your understanding. Like they all have to engage together, because if it's just one out of these things, then you won't progress at all. You know, like everything has to kind of come together. And that's why it's a slow process, because sometimes your heart's dragging its feet. Sometimes your spirit's dragging its feet. Sometimes your reasoning is dragging its feet. And they kind of all have to shuffle along together, you know. And it's just how it goes. But you can learn some cool things with psychedelics, you know, or you can lose your shit. You know, there's one time the me and my buddies, we weren't, it wasn't LSD. I think we were rolling on ecstasy, and I think it was spiked with something, because it was not normal. And I remember we had gotten a pizza, and we were sitting down in my buddy's kitchen, and I bit into it and chewing this pizza, and it felt like, you know, those like those thumbtacks that they don't have a handle, or I guess no thumbtacks. It's push pins have the plastic colored handle. Thumbtacks have just the polished like dome, and then the pointy stick, right? So like shaped like just like a tiny umbrella, right? I felt like my mouth was filled with those as I was biting into the pizza and chewing. My whole mouth felt like it was filled with thumbtacks. It was fucking crazy. But you know what? I was so fucking high and it tasted so good. I just fuck it. Started eating. Yeah, but you think, you know, the things you do when you're a young man. So Guns here says psychedelics is the calculator for the mind. It gives you the answers without showing you the work. Yes, yeah, exactly. That's a fantastic analogy. You want mind altering? Go live in a wilderness cabin alone for 6 months. Yeah, yep. And yeah, like catch your own food. Like you don't have a fucking refrigerator. Don't have electricity. Yeah, now you better learn how to fucking smoke meat, or else yeah, you're gonna yeah, survival period, you know. Actually, I would say nature period is probably a better drug. Like nature for extended periods of time is a better transformative drug than transformative drugs. You know, like people are saying, uh, oh, you know, let's start using like mushrooms in psychotherapy as like a, you know, like a means to address people with depression. And I have friends who they were on like depression drugs. I don't know what the fuck they're called, and they stopped taking them, and they started doing like microdosing of mushrooms, and their fucking depression was like fucking gone. And I was like, holy shit, you know. And they stopped taking the pharmaceuticals, which is great. And I'm thinking like, man, what if they were to just fucking go into the woods, like minimal, you know, you're like in a cabin, and it's like no running water, you know, but there is like a means to get fresh water like nearby, but like you don't have a sink, you don't have toilets, you don't have refrigeration, and you got to be there for like 3 months, you know. I think that'd be a way to like really purge some shit, you know, because like all those demons that all those demons, there would be no fucking distractions, no buffers, none of those things like preventing them from coming to the surface. And it's like you're the fucking alone in the woods, so it's like you either sink or swim, right? You're either gonna fucking go nuts, you're gonna off yourself, or you're gonna make it to the other side, you know. And I like probably it'd be very risky because you don't know what the outcome would be, but I have a good feeling that a lot of like mental problems, I mean, unless there's like serious shit, you know, like someone's got like schizophrenia, but I'm saying like someone's got depression or anxiety or whatever, like that shit would be cured. I think that shit would be totally fucking cured. And you just give them like a book, like, okay, this is how you dress an animal. This is how you can, like trap a rabbit or something like that. And so like the tools and maybe the bit of knowledge is like there, so you don't fucking die of starvation. But you have to do the work. Like there's no calculator. You have to figure it out. Um, they just present you with the tools. Man, that'd be a crazy program. Definitely the government would not allow that. They're like, nah, too many people fucking going crazy and killing themselves. Or somebody would like figure out like how to make alcohol. They would just drink. There'd be some people like that, like, oh yeah. I remember we just take like a jar and like stuff some apples in it and bury that thing. I'm gonna have alcohol pretty soon. Just get fucking wasted for 3 months. Anyways, all right, I'm gonna shove off here. Appreciate you all coming through. I really enjoy when I have people here uh, sharing the space with me. It does wonders for my heart. And thank you for watching on the replay. I appreciate you as well. Like I said, if any questions, just go to the website, hit the contact button, shoot me an email, and we'll take things from there. Otherwise, go to the website, check out the tutorials, grab up a couple of audios in there, and some of them, I think, or many of them, have like cool visuals, a little bit of background music, and so it's a little bit more enjoyable than just me like talking into the microphone. So, all right. Until next time.